A lone elephant bull makes his way slowly through a winter thorn forest. Elephants are the icons of the Lower Zambezi National Park. Gathering here in vast numbers like they've done for thousands of years. The constant supply of water and abundant food provides a haven for them. This morning, the solitary bull has the pick of the canopy. If he can reach it. It's the middle of June and the start of the dry season. The trees' branches, dripping in pollen-covered pods, offer an irresistible treat for a hungry elephant at this time of year. He tugs at the branches, using his dexterous trunk to get a firm grip. Over 40,000 muscles work in unison to ensure he gets what he wants. The bull's home is one of Africa's most scenic parks. Lying on the border of Zambia and Zimbabwe, the Lower Zambezi is also one of the continent's hidden treasures. Life thrives here in abundance. A variety of habitats exist in an area of just over 1,500 square miles, bordered by an escarpment to the north and the mighty river to the south. The mix of woodlands, plains, forests and river islands sits side by side in extremely close proximity. Winterthorn trees invade the river's floodplains and sandbars, providing food and shelter to a variety of animals under their canopies. Away from the forests, as the soil dries, grassland plains take over. Here, grazers congregate to feed, and predators follow. At the base of the escarpment, as the land rises, Mopani woodlands appear. This is an eerie world. Flowing through this patchwork of habitats is the Zambezi River itself. A network of waterways and islands that's the lifeline of the park. As the season changes from wet to dry, water levels begin to drop throughout the valley, and animals are drawn to the Zambezi's shores by the promise of nourishment. The elephants approach with caution, trunks and tails held aloft. Anything dangling in the muddy water is a potential target. This time, they all make it across unscathed. They'll spend the day moving between the islands as they feed, before making the return crossing in time for nightfall. On the grasslands away from the river, finding a meal is becoming a matter of life and death for one family. Motherhood is never easy. This lioness is faced with an impossible decision. One of her cubs is struggling to keep up, and she must decide whether or not to abandon him to his fate. He was injured when two adult males moved into his mother's territory and tried to kill the cubs so they could mate with her. He only survived because she decided to flee with her young family instead of accepting the new order. They're now outcasts, extremely thin and in desperate need of food. But with the young male falling behind, progress is slow and hunting is challenging. Lionesses won't usually slow their pace for cubs more than 6 months old. Those too weak to keep up are typically left behind. But this time, the mother's instinct is not to abandon her cub just yet. For now, she finds some shade and waits for her youngest to catch up. As the afternoon draws to a close throughout the lower Zambezi, animals are on the move. The cool hours before sunset provide respite from the heat. This is one of the busiest times on the plains as grazers leave the surrounding forests to feed. Zebras, impala, baboons and waterbuck all make their way onto the grasslands with a spring in their step. After feeding on the islands, it's time for the elephants to return to the mainland. The big bulls gather on the banks for a drink before they cross. The reeds have provided them with enough fodder for the day, but they need a staggering 58 gallons of water to wash them down. One by one, the elephants enter the river and power through its waters. Safely back on the mainland, the herd heads for overnight shelter. This routine will continue throughout the dry season, while the elephants cross the narrow channels to feast on the island's bounties. But during the wet season, when the river waters rise and spread deeper into the park, the lower Zambezi's elephants will disperse far and wide, traveling all the way up into the escarpment. Four inexperienced bachelors weren't watching where the others chose to cross. With the sun setting, they're forced to take on one of the deeper channels in order to make it across by nightfall. As the channel deepens and the current quickens, the bulls huddle together. Once they find their footing and don't pick up the scent of any lurking crocs, they relax. The refreshing waters cool the herd before they head into the forest in time for sunset. With the last of the elephants safely back on the mainland, the river islands fall quiet for another day. Early morning in the park signals a flurry of activity. Grazers on the plains make the most of the early light and cool temperatures to feed. While the wide open spaces provide opportunities for many, they provide stress for others. The first job of the day for this male impala is making sure all his females are accounted for. Other suitors are vying for their attention. The herd needs regrouping so he can keep a closer eye on them. It seems some of the females need more persuading than others. As temperatures rise and with everyone finally together, The ram leads his harem into the sanctuary of the winterthorn forests, where they'll spend the day. He's wise to lead them to shelter. The lioness has killed a warthog, and the family are enjoying their first meal in days. The youngsters are well on their way to being fully grown, and this won't be enough to sustain them for long. Despite his injury, the young male puts up a brave fight. And makes sure he gets a meal. Meanwhile, his brother makes off with the head. Vultures arrive to take care of what little remains. And the lions retreat to a patch of shade to rest. It's a promising start to their day. But the risk of starvation will only recede once the young become capable of killing for themselves. This is not something that will happen overnight. Hunting takes practice, and the cubs will need to watch and learn from their mother before they're able to take down prey on their own. One advantage the family does have is that a relatively small amount of nutrient-rich meat provides them with large amounts of energy. So they only have to eat every few days. However, for the park's herbivores, eating is a daily necessity. A fully grown elephant needs up to 350 pounds of food a day to sustain it. As a herd makes its way through the winterthorn forest, the elephants are dwarfed by their setting. These magical forests spread along the riverbanks in great swathes. Winterthorns thrive in waterlogged soils along rivers and floodplains, making the banks of the lower Zambezi an ideal habitat for them. And the river's many tributaries have allowed the forests to spread deeper into the park. This in turn provides vital wildlife corridors. As the dry season draws animals towards the river, they take shelter under the cathedral-like canopies created by the mighty trees. Despite their considerable bulk, the elephants move surprisingly quietly. Once in the trees, they keep in touch via smell. And low guttural rumbles. The start of the dry season is when the winter thorns seed. The trees offer succulent pollen-covered pods, but at almost 100 feet up in the canopy, they can be hard to reach. However, the elephants have discovered a trick to accessing the seasonal treats. When motivated, an elephant can produce immense feats of strength. His efforts are rewarded. On the edge of the winterthorn forest, as the trees spread out, extra light penetrates, allowing more grass to grow. These will attract grazers throughout the dry season as they move through in great numbers to feed, while the open forest continues to provide shade and security. A breeding herd of elephants has spent the day feeding and sheltering their calves in the dense Mopani woodland that borders the escarpment. As the dry season tightens its grip, the herd's movements will have to change. They'll start spending more and more time by the river in order to find enough food and water for their growing family. Mothers, daughters, aunts and nieces all travel together. As the afternoon's shadows creep across the valley, the elephants cross the plains to reach the sanctuary of the winterthorns. They rely on their matriarch, the oldest, wisest female. She knows the quickest routes to fruiting trees, where to drink, and how to protect the youngest. Where there are females, bulls often follow. An expectant male tails the herd, patiently biding his time until someone is ready to mate. One of the biggest differences between breeding herds and bachelor herds of elephants is the speed they travel. As the family enters the winterthorns, it hardly breaks stride, with the matriarch setting the pace. Even the youngest member, who's just a few weeks old, must keep up. The matriarch has her reasons for traveling so quickly. pride of lions is more than capable of taking down a young elephant. So she'll only stop once they reach either food, water, or shelter. The winterthorn forest provides all three. Their devoted bull has arrived, and he's in need of a mud bath. This soothing ritual cools his skin and helps remove any unwanted passengers. Safely embedded among the trees, the elephants relax and begin to feed, while the bull finishes with a body scrub. As the sun sets across the lower Zambezi, the park reveals one of its greatest spectacles. Sunrise in the Mopani woodland is unnervingly quiet. The trees grow at the base of the Zambezi escarpment and are the furthest habitat from the river. It's a hostile world, and there's little sign of wildlife. Unlike the floodplains where the winterthorn forests thrive, the soil here is bone dry, and the change of seasons has little effect. Impervious clay lies under a shallow layer of sand, so the ground has little capacity to absorb rainwater. The drought-adapted Mopani trees thrive under these conditions, but there's scant other vegetation and few animals to speak of. But it's not the lack of water that keeps the animals out. It's the trees themselves. Their secret defense can be found in their leaves. The lung-shaped foliage breathes life into the woodlands and also protects them. When an animal starts feeding on a Mopani tree, the leaves release a toxin that irritates the attacker, forcing it to move off. As the surrounding trees emit the noxious concoction, a chain reaction flows through the woodland, driving the intruders away. As a result, little stirs in the Mopani. One animal that is brave enough to enter is the elephant. The silent giants seem able to put up with the tree's defenses and move through the woodland. Clues to their passing lie in the leaf litter below. However, the elephant dung isn't the end of the Mopani's story. Thanks to a hidden army of helpers, it's just another step in the cycle of the woodland's life. A closer look reveals a miniature world full of activity. Termites are essential for creating life in every one of the Lower Zambezi's habitats. Animal dung, fallen trees, seasonal leaves. The termites take care of them all. The tiny insects break down the dead material and regenerate it into soil. This increases nutrient levels, water infiltration, and promotes new growth. Over time, this pile of dung will regenerate the woodland from which it came. In this way, termites are the ultimate ecosystem engineers, maintaining habitats across this great park. On the woodland floor, something's afoot. Warriors are on the move. A raiding party of Matabele ants swarms over a termite nest and sends the colony into chaos. Matabele ants feed exclusively on termites and can return to the same colony time and time again. The smaller ants go underground to flush out the termites, and the larger ones wait at the entrance. Armed with ferocious mandibles, the large ants disable the fleeing termites with a single bite. The ruthless warriors take anything they can find and head off back to their nest. The raid is over as quickly as it began. Despite the onslaught, the unwelcome intrusion hardly makes a dent. The termite colonies have more than 10 times the numbers the ants do, creating a cycle in which the predators can continually harvest their prey. Across the park, clouds gather, promising much, but delivering very little. The dry season is now in full swing, and there won't be rain for months. Away from the main river, pools and streams are drying up as the floodwaters that once fed them recede. Those free to do so will leave with the waters. Others remain trapped. These catfish will most likely fall victim to predators such as fish eagles and leopards. But if they don't, and they keep moist, they'll be able to survive for the next few months until the rains return and the waters rise. Despite the lack of moisture, the riverside winterthorn trees are still a brilliant green. This area's lush appearance is not due to rainfall. This is in fact the driest ecological area in Zambia. Its nourishment comes from the river itself. Along the banks, soils retain large amounts of moisture and nutrients from the river's floodwater long after it's gone, allowing vegetation to flourish. The mighty Zambezi will never stop flowing, but its tributaries are drying up rapidly. At the far reaches of the park, the search for water begins to draw animals all in the same direction. A herd of buffalo leaves the plains and heads towards the river. One of the few remaining pools provides a pit stop along the way. After the drink, the herd disperses. Females and young divide into smaller units and head off to feed. For one lone bull, this is the chance he's been waiting for. While the dominant bulls feed elsewhere, this small mixed herd is his for the taking. A young male approaches cautiously and quickly realizes he's outgunned by the newcomer. In a show of submission, the older bull is given his cue to stake his claim. After passing the first test, he embeds himself at the center of the newly formed herd. He's earned himself the opportunity to mate and sire offspring of his own. At least until the dominant bulls return, when the herds reform. The outcast lioness has also led her young family in search of water. Like the buffalo, they've left the plains and have moved towards the river. The injured cub is keeping up, even though his leg still hasn't fully recovered. They watch as a small herd of impala enters the clearing. The male leaves his harem of females and heads to the water to drink. As he inches closer, the cubs take up the stalking position. It's the first time the cubs have displayed stalking behavior around prey. Although they missed this time, it's a great sign for the future. Soon they'll be able to participate in hunts. Within a year, they'll be efficient predators, allowing the lioness to target larger and larger prey. If her cubs can support her on the hunt, the chances of them making it to independence and finding a place for themselves within the park look good. The lower Zambezi has remained unknown to many outside of Zambia for decades. Yet pressures from the modern world are starting to close in. The demands for ivory, rhino horn, animal skins and bushmeat that plague vast swathes of the continent do not bode well for the park's most iconic residents. In 2013, Zambia was one of 20 countries to participate in the Great Elephant Census, which was the first of its kind in 40 years. The aerial survey covered 8,500 square miles of the country. The results were clear. In the lower Zambezi, numbers are declining. Although people pose the greatest danger to the park and its animals, they're also integral to its survival. Africa is losing its iconic wildlife. It needs wild places such as this if these animals are to have a future. The great parks of Africa are not only symbols of this struggle, they're the ultimate solution and must be protected.